Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Sam Corey. I'm so excited to be here with you, Tia. What do we have going on in the program today?
Well, today it's Hispanic Heritage Month, and we'll chat with the Wayne State history professor about Latinos in Detroit, the migration, the contributions, everything that we tend not to know about the Latino presence here in Detroit and southeastern Michigan. So I'm super excited about that conversation.
Yeah, and it's so rich. I'm so glad we get the opportunity to dive into that.
Indeed, indeed. Today's going to be a really rich show. We have tons of cool conversations that I'm really excited to get into. So let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. I'm so excited. Housing has become unaffordable for many Detroiters. One number that's really stood out to me in this space of housing is 990. That's the median rental rate in Detroit, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, and it's causing many to be rent burdened. One way to ease that burden is to build more affordable units. Detroit's mayor and city council are trying to do just that. A new ordinance that's being discussed is the Fast Track Pilot, which would offer property tax cuts to developers that then get passed on as cheaper rental units. The cheaper the rental rate, the deeper the tax cut. That's the deal. To discuss this now is a city council member who has been working on this ordinance. Just this past week, he also launched his candidate committee to run for mayor in 2025. District 7 city council member Fred Durhal III, thanks so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning to you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here with us. And also, I should say, District 7 includes a lot of Detroit west of Grand River.
Yes, absolutely, west side.
Yeah. So I want to start out this conversation by playing a cut of Mayor Mike Duggan talking about this fast track ordinance a few weeks ago.
What the fast track does is says to a developer, if you're willing to commit to low rent for the next 15 years, you can get a fast track for a tax break. And if you'll take an abandoned apartment building, we'll actually give you twice as big a tax break. So instead of knocking down these beautiful old buildings, we can get them reused.
Councilmember Fred Durhal, I'm wondering if you could describe the Fast Track Pilot and the potential benefits to renters in the city.
Absolutely. So first, I think, we have to talk about the history of how we got here. And this is an ordinance that's designed to address Detroit's affordable housing crisis and also provide some type of long-term stability for residents across all income levels. But back in 2022, the Michigan legislature passed Public Act 239, which allowed cities to use what we call pilots or payment in lieu of taxes agreements to work and build workforce housing without needing federal low-income housing programs. It's important to know that there's a pilot or a payment in lieu of taxes tool that already exists, but it's more so tailored towards low-income housing. And so one of the things that we have found through development, even through that pilot ordinance and just other abatements that exist, is for smaller developers, it becomes typically hard to build low-income housing based off of timelines, based off of access to capital. And so in this ordinance, we wanted to fast track to address that, to work to get more affordable housing built faster, while also creating a commitment to affordability for up to 15 years, as well as creating an agreement for compliance. So as we push this fast track forward, we anticipate it'll take less time to be able to get some of these developments going and spark some of these developments in our communities and our commercial corridors.
Yeah, there's so much there that I want to dive into. The Detroit Justice Center reports that Detroit needs about 46,000 affordable units to service residents. I'm wondering how many affordable units you think might be able to be built in the city with this program and how fast that could happen.
So, we're looking and hoping that we can build at least 1,400 to 1,500 units per year just with this specific tool. We know that when we talk about housing instability, not just in the city of Detroit, but across our nation, it's a big issue, one of the biggest issues that we're facing. And one of the barriers that exist is when we talk about development and utilizing this tool, if developers have an incentive to build affordable housing in communities, we can provide rents that are good for the residents, rents that they can be able to pay, that they can be able to afford. When we talk about what is considered affordable, your housing should not consume more than 30% of your income. And we know that living here in the city of Detroit, we have a lot of folks who are paying rent, and it's consuming more than 30% of their income. So we're committed to building tools to provide that affordability, accessibility to developers, so that, again, goes down to the renters. If it doesn't cost as much or take as long to build some of these affordable units, then the rent should not be as high.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that point. I mean, the rent burden, it really makes life really, really hard for people. I mean, that money could be going to a lot of other things. And when you're paying so much of it towards housing, it just kind of cripples or shackles people. You mentioned earlier, and it's been said, that this is a good deal for smaller minority-owned developers who struggle to access tax breaks, often tailored for large-scale developments. I guess I'm wondering why this is specifically the case and why larger or richer developers might not just eat up this tax break. Why would this specifically go to smaller developers?
Well, so a lot of the larger developers generally have access when they're building low-income housing in communities. They have access to, like, the original pilot ordinance, where it's a lot easier for them to get LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, because they're built. They have the capacity to be able to do that. They have the access to capital that some of our smaller developers, particularly minority developers, don't have that access to. I worked for the Michigan State Housing Development Authority prior to coming and serving on the council, and had an opportunity to really just view how low-income housing works, low-income housing tax credits work, and there are a lot of components that are attached to that. And one of the components that are attached to being able to get a LIHTC is building housing, particularly if it's low-income, in communities that have great walkability, meaning that they're walkable neighborhoods where you can do everything within 1 mile of your home. And some of our smaller developers, as well as minority developers, generally don't build in the area that has a lot of walkability, because the city of Detroit, we're still growing. We're still working on building our commercial corridors, and you see some of those projects happening in some of those corridors that have not been particularly developed yet. So the walkability is not there. This creates a tool, and as passed by the Michigan legislature, that allows cities and municipalities to be able to determine and have a level of self-determination of how they want to do affordable housing within their city. And so this ordinance is going to push it forward. And again, in this ordinance, we work to ensure that we are going to lock developers into a rate of affordability for 15 years. And also, if they choose to renew for another 15 years, and which you normally don't see, we're talking like a 30-year type of deal. This will allow to this will actually promote a level of sustainability for affordable housing in the city.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Detroit Council member Fred Durhal about his attempts to create more affordable housing in the city. He also just launched a candidate committee to run for mayor in Detroit in 2025. We'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, Council Member Durhal, this is Tia chatting with you. What kind of rates might this program help to offer renters? How low might the rent be able to go for folks out there? Just like you heard Sam talking just a little bit earlier, it is extremely costly to be a renter right now in the city of Detroit, and it does really put a burden on folks. So how will we see this working out for people?
Yeah, so, what we're kind of looking at as far as the scale is concerned, and when the developers get this incentive, it's based off of the rate of affordability that they are looking to provide. This ordinance will span anywhere between 30% to 120% AMI, noting that 80% to 120% AMI is generally focused on workforce housing. So those are your folks who may be your dental hygienists. Those might be folks who in some levels work and have higher salaries in the automotive industry, right? Or some of our nurses in the city of Detroit. But we anticipate, for an example, owner rent say an owner rents units to a household with an average income below $39,000, they'll receive a pilot tax of $50 a year, where the original tax was $600 a year. And that will help keep the rates between $500 and $900 a month for one-bedroom rentals. For owners who rent units to households with an average income below $52,000, their original taxes for the developers would have been $3,200 a year. We're going to cut that down to $300 a year, so we can maintain one-bedroom rents between $900 to $1,400 a month. And owners who rent units to households with an average income of $80,000 or below $80,000, they had an original tax of $600 a year. This pilot tax will kind of bring it down to about $1,500 a year to preserve affordability between $1,400 and $2,100 a month. And so it's locking in those rates. And I think it's very important to note that what happens is in the city of Detroit, because we have utilized tax abatements to really build housing here, some of those agreements are coming towards an end, which they call an abatement cliff, meaning that when those abatements come to an end, generally what you see happen in some instances is that folks who are locked into affordability because of those abatements, they generally switch over to market rate rentals, which can cause displacement for residents. And so we're really focusing on creating that tool as well. So folks who may be on that abatement cliff, who are developers and have those affordable units who have been locked into a previous abatement, when they come into and come into the end of that abatement, we can say, here's another tool. If you would like to continue to rent at an affordable rate and get a tax break so folks are not displaced, this is a tool you can use.
Yeah. Councilmember Durhal, I want to, I guess, push you a little bit or maybe understand this a little bit better. I know you've been talking about how developers must commit to keeping rent discounted for 15 years and maintain compliance with Detroit rental regulations and pass an annual audit. That's a lot. There's a lot of sort of oversight there. Yes. But they could, my understanding is they could feasibly take the money and then decide later on to not get the tax break and not get the money anymore because they want to raise their rates and because they could make more money. I guess I'm wondering what would stop them from doing that.
So for newer developers, and I think you're speaking more so for newer developers, if they came and they, built new structures and we locked them into 15 years and then the 15 years expired, could they come and then raise the rents after that and decide, hey, they want to do market rate? They could have the ability to do that. But what we've seen in the city of Detroit, for most folks who provide affordable housing, who are able to get that level of incentive so they can continue with these affordable housing rents in the units that they provide, those folks want to have a longer-term access to those tax breaks. And so we haven't seen a lot of folks who, again, would not want some type of tax break when they have affordable units. The problem is that some of the folks who are locked into these current abatements for affordable housing, when they reach the end of those abatements, there's not another tool available for them to do that. And so this also helps create a level of diversity for affordable housing, where if someone had a previous abatement that expired, let's say after 12 years, this is another tool that they can go apply for and utilize and be locked in again for another 15 years. And so we look at it more so as an incentive to incentivize a lot of the developers, not only just to do affordable housing for 15 years, but an additional 15 years. When you talk about folks who, let's say you have your home for a mortgage, mortgages are generally 30-year mortgages, right? Mm-hmm. This helps them and incentivizes them. Okay, you got your 15 years up front. Well, and you've committed and you've agreed to that. You've committed to compliance for 15 years. Another thing that's baked into that, if they wanted to renew for another 15 years, mm-hmm. we're requiring them to at least spend $6,000 per unit to upgrade those units. And with the payment in lieu of taxes, that would help it make it more feasible. We talk about but-for here with development. We talk about the rising cost of inflation. We particularly, again, talk about smaller developers or minority developers who don't have access to capital but want to build affordable housing, particularly in the city of Detroit. this is a game changer for them.
Councilmember Durhal, running really low on time, but I would be remiss. I need to ask you one question about tax capture, which I know is a little bit wonky, but a new report by the Michigan Citizens Research Council says that we should not be using tax capture, that is taking tax money from businesses to invest in the downtown, because our downtown is already developed and that money could be going to other public spaces. I've read that you think tax capture is still really important. I'm wondering why, and I'm wondering for how long you think it might be important.
Yeah, so I don't know if we have a specific time of when we should end tax captures. But what I will say is if we look at what the DDA has done over the past years, we've been able to develop our downtown, which has allowed us to create more revenue, create more jobs. So I do believe it's an important component, and we're not done yet. When we talk about one of our most underutilized assets, which is the Detroit River and our riverfront, we've got to continue to still build and push that up. When you look at Chicago, they have an amazing riverfront. They have a Navy pier there. And I think there's certain opportunities that we can have here in the city of Detroit to be able to provide that. But one of the other things that I want to look at is how we do tax captures, or maybe how we can expand the DDA. So when we talk about commercial corridors, which is Detroit's next fight to build these commercial corridors that are adjacent to these neighborhoods, maybe we find a way to expand it so each individual neighborhood could have somewhat, to speak, their own main street, and we can utilize that tool to build those corridors.
So in other words, like you said, expanding the Downtown Development Authority, like trying to create corridors or high business traffic-gated areas in other parts of the city, not just downtown. Is that right?
Absolutely. So if you look at somewhere on the west side, like an Avenue of Fashion, which is a booming commercial corridor, we can have that in multiple neighborhoods that are adjacent to communities in the city of Detroit, but we've got to have the tools to be able to use it. So I would say we don't end all tax captures immediately, but we also find a way to kind of titrate our way off of that while still having the ability to develop our commercial corridors and our communities.
All right. Detroit Council Member for District 7, Fred Durhal III, thanks so much for joining us on the Metro. Really appreciate it. And also got to say, we weren't able to talk about your candidate committee to run for mayor in Detroit, but we would love to have you back on to discuss that.
I would love to come back and talk about our vision and the conversation that we're having with residents across the city.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is the Metro. Coming up, we'll discuss Planet Ant's theater season, which begins this weekend at its home in Hamtramck. You stay right there. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET-FM. I am Tia Graham, here with our show's producer, Sam Corey, who is on the mic with me this week. Sam, it's been a treat.
Tia, it's so great. I love being here with you. It's a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun, yeah. So we just wanted to make sure that you are feeling comfortable as well as you're on the microphone. Are you feeling comfortable?
I'm feeling comfortable because of you. You're great.
All right,
you're awesome.
birthday week, so...
You're like, cut that off. No, you're amazing.
It's the birthday week.
And that's why I'm comfortable. We have so many great segments here, and we want to hop into them right now. One of them, I should say. Third spaces are crucial for folks in Detroit and around the country. A bar, a cafe, a library, these places that are not the workplace or home, but are amenable to hanging out in a lot of different important ways. Hamtramck's Planet Ant has been trying to make itself one of those spots. A neighborhood theater specializing in improv, plays, and musical, the theater is meant to foster socializing, play, and the opportunity for people to stretch themselves artistically. This weekend, Planet Ant begins its theater season, beginning October 11th and stretching into the summer. To discuss that now and the importance of open, accessible, and artistic spaces, we have Mike McGettigan here. Mike is the program director at Planet Ant. Mike, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to have you here in studio. It's so great. It's so great. So hopping in here, there are a number of shows kicking off the theater season, including The Big Bing Theory, The Bald Soprano, and True West. Talk to us a little bit about those shows and what you're most excited about.
Certainly. Well, I'm pretty much equally excited about all three because I have to be equal about this, right?
Do you have to?
They all need love. They all
Exactly.
or maybe not. They can have different kinds of love.
favorites. No, not
that's
right now.
That's
though.
No, it's true.
That's
It's
true. That
true.
could be
I mean,
dangerous for you.
Yes.
I do love them all for different reasons, just like my children,
Exactly.
which I only have one child, so that's easy.
Yeah, you really. That's a cop out right there.
It is. It's an easy way out. But yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I really am excited about Bald Soprano coming up, which is this Friday. I kept wanting to say tomorrow, but it's only Wednesday, guys.
Yeah.
But Bald Soprano is a work by Eugene Ionesco. He's a guy that is like known as the father of absurd theater. So it's real weird stuff.
Whoa.
But it's
what kind of weird?
Oh well, if you like weird, you're gonna like it.
Okay.
But it's weird in the way it deconstructs language and social relationships. This guy, Eugene Ionesco, is kind of just like a mind-blowing writer, and he's done a lot of really cool stuff. That opens Friday, directed by a guy that has been directing shows in Metro Detroit for decades. Chuck Reynolds, he's kind of a genius in the artistic world. Used to run the Abreact Theater, which was around for a very long time. Yeah. That's coming up this Friday and opening up. And then also on this Friday is our sketch comedy show that's opening called The Big Bing Theory.
Yeah.
Don't ask me why it's called The Big Bing Theory. I'm not exactly sure yet.
Okay.
I guess we'll all find out together on Friday.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
You gotta find out
Love
where to go.
sketch comedy.
And that's put up by Sean Hanlon, who you might have remembered us from the Detroit musical that came out a few years ago that he wrote and directed and put up. And he's kind of a comedy genius. Used to work at Second City. Yeah. He's been doing stuff for a long time with us, and he's a good friend of mine. Really, really great creator. So both those coming up. And then True West is a little later. That's opening up in the fall, and that's another one of our artistic traditional theater season. True West is a Sam Shepard play, and also a tremendous work, and really can be a little disturbing if you like that sort of thing. Which
Okay.
Do you like disturbing?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Binge your HBO shows.
I do. I like to be haunted a little bit. In
that's
film
not my
and in
thing.
theater.
You know?
Okay.
Or
That's all.
roller coasters. Other thing. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no,
We all get thrills
no.
different ways.
But I do like weird. So
Yeah.
that was one of the things.
Oh, good.
I do
You,
like
grabbed
weird.
onto the
oh,
weird.
Yeah.
Me
So
too.
when I think about that, and when you talked about weird, I think about Planet Ant being a space and a place for shows that are off the wall or
Oh,
off the cuff, or
absolutely.
things that you just wouldn't expect to see or experience. You would experience at Planet Ant. So if you can talk about fostering that environment of weirdos and, like you said, dark stuff and just haunted stuff, just all those things that come together to make us these complete human beings.
Oh, absolutely. Well put. I love that. That's my goal at Planet Ant, is to foster that space and to create a space for people in Metro Detroit to come in and do their work. I mean, you tell their stories. And that to me is super important. I could have a lot of jobs out there in this world. There's a lot of jobs that pay a lot more than that.
You're here in the arts.
Everyone donate to Planet Ant Theater.
And WDT.
Okay.
And
We're
both
all
nonprofits. We all,
Both,
yeah.
absolutely. Both nonprofit, absolutely. But it's really important that we foster a place that's really safe for people, where they feel comfortable to express themselves artistically. It's really, really amazing to watch people come into our place and maybe start with our classes or start with just seeing shows or being a regular attendee. And then suddenly that develops into a friendship. Suddenly they're there all the time. Suddenly there's a whole group of friends that they have. Yeah. And then, before you know it, they're putting on a show that they've never done before. Yeah. We have teams that we specifically run to help boost those folks. So we have a farm team, and we just cast those for this year. And those are 6 creators that are all going to put out original works that they are going to write and direct themselves. We've been doing this for like 4 years now.
That's so cool.
And it is so cool to see people come in and figure out what kind of stories they want to tell. tell and put them up on stage. We love to give people a chance to put up things that might not get a voice somewhere else.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to get
No.
a little deeper into that, but I also need to bring people in right now. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Mike McGettigan, Program Director at Planet Ant. We're talking about the upcoming theater this season and why it's important to have artistic spaces for people to explore. Mike, I wanted to get into this because I think it's so interesting. You were an actor teacher in Second City in Chicago. Talk a little bit about what were some of the biggest lessons that you took from being in that space and helping people develop a craft and create the stories that they want to tell.
Thank you. Just a minor correction. It wasn't Chicago, but Detroit.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. All right.
Well, there is a difference. I mean, Second City would find a difference for
yes,
sure.
yeah, that's
They'd be like,
that's accurate.
what are you doing claiming this?
Yes.
But anyways, I did work at Second City in Detroit, and what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Developing a craft, what you
yes.
learned from that space and what you learned about helping others develop a craft.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's really important. The culture in Second City was such that if you started working there as an actor, they were like, oh, you're also a teacher. And we were like, wait a minute, what? I'm a teacher too? And they're like, yeah, you're a teacher now. And then they're like, well, you're also a writer. I'm like, what? We're writers? Yeah, I guess we are. So, all of that culture kind of infused a lot of us that worked in the Second City at that time period with an understanding that we have to be the culture leaders in that way. And we have a responsibility to bring up the next batch of people that are all here to learn and be part of this crazy, weird artistic world. Yeah. So we've carried that on through Second City, or from Second City into the Planet Ant, and we foster that exact same environment here. We have classes on all kinds of different subjects, and that helps bring our culture together and foster a lot of new people that come into our spaces. And we just love to see what people bring to us and see what their ideas are. Yeah. Like, that's one of the things that we will never, ever do is dictate top down, like, oh, this isn't funny or something. It's not about that.
Yeah.
We are here to find people and foster whatever they think is funny.
That's so cool.
So it's like, we're giving you the chance to come in and tell your stories the way you want them. And that's so important because nowadays we're on television, we're on streaming, we are mindless zombies on our phones all the time. And, we don't get a lot of in-person and like really peak experience stuff that happens to us in real life. And I think that's something that we offer and something that we really thrive on is giving people not only these peak experiences and these cool opportunities to express themselves, but we're offering the way to connect with other people that are like you. And that's how I felt when I first started. I was like, oh my God, there's other weirdos like me out here. Yeah. I'm like felt alone for so long trying to do jokes at an office where people were like giving me the weird eyes. Like, what are you talking about?
This is your space. This is where you get to do that. Yeah.
And we are running short on time here, so we definitely want to get back to this season and this upcoming comedy season and everything that's going on at Planet Ant. But just wanted to talk a little bit really quickly about Second City in Detroit. Were you there around the same time as Mark Evan Jackson?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you were working.
He worked here. Yeah.
And he happened to be, he's a friend of the show.
Yes.
And he's here often. So, just talk about working with those individuals and how it helped you continue your trajectory in your career. Because, I mean, you're here and you're mentoring and you're teaching and you probably didn't see yourself as a teacher.
Well, when I started this whole thing, I did not see myself as becoming a teacher, as becing a administrator in Planet Ant. I was like, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a director, I'm an artist. I want to do that stuff, But I really have found a love for helping foster other people. But that still does not mean that I'm letting go of my own artistic drive as well, because I think it's really important for all of us that are admins in this building to also make sure that we stay contributing to the arts. Yeah. People like Mark Evan Jackson, Keegan-Michael Key was my very first improv instructor.
Wow.
Amazing.
It sounds crazy now, but
Key and Peele
it really wasn't. He was just a hilarious guy at Second City. My very first guy walking in the door down there downtown. Amazing. Sam and Tim, I've done a lot of work with those guys. Sam Richardson and Tim Robinson.
Of course,
those guys are wonderful. I love those guys and what they do. They worked extensively at Planet Ant, and that's the kind of place that we are growing and building here. Yeah. I mean, hey, come be the next Sam or Tim. Come be the next Keegan or Mark Evan Jackson. Right. All those guys have done some amazing work out in LA and here too. Yeah. So come see where those next folks are coming from or be one of them.
It's happening this weekend. It's kicking off. Mike, I just have one last question for you because I know we're wrapping this up. Planet Ant since in Hamtramck and the political leadership of that city has shifted pretty significantly over time, becoming much more socially conservative. The mayor himself has come out in support of Donald Trump. Planet Ant itself attracts a lot of younger, more liberal generally, and queer folks. I'm wondering how the role of Planet Ant has shifted with the city's politics over time. What has the space become, I guess?
Well, I don't necessarily think that we have shifted, but we've probably strengthened, and we've probably doubled down on who we are over the time. It is pretty disturbing to live 3 blocks away from a Trump-Vance headquarters.
Yeah, I've seen that. I don't live that far from there either.
Yeah, that's
I live
like
in
right
the
at the
Davison
end of my
neighborhood.
street.
Yeah,
It is weird.
yeah.
It is weird. But personally, I find it disturbing to see that sort of thing and the Trump welcome and the mayor, whatever. But I will tell you that we have so many committed folks that are in our building to making that place a safe and welcoming environment that you win with love. I mean, you always win with love, right? And that's what we are focused on.
Mike McGettigan, Program Director at Planet Ant, thanks so much for joining us on the Metro. We really appreciate it. And also, I want to say you can find information about Planet Ant's shows at planetant.com/events.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Win with love today, everybody.
Yeah.
Coming up, Hispanic Heritage Month runs from September 15th to October 15th. Next, we'll speak with an expert about the history of Latinos in Michigan and Detroit.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham here with Sam Corey.
Hey, Tia.
How's it going?
It's great. It's great being here with you.
I know I keep asking you that, but it's just because I'm excited to be across from you. And I'm excited to learn new things with you because we always have new things to learn and talk about here on the Metro. Mm-hmm. And it is Hispanic Heritage Month. And as we get closer to the end of October, or the end of the month, which is on October 15th, we want to discuss the community that has been extremely important to the growth of Detroit, especially in the last 200 years. Today, we know of Southwest Detroit, or Mexican town, as home to one of the largest populations of Latin Americans in the state. But how exactly did it come to be? And what led to the migration of people from Central and South America? And what made Detroit a destination for folks? Joining us to chat more about the history of Latinos in Detroit, we have Dr. Reina Escobar King. Dr. King is a Wayne State University professor for the History Department and Center for Latin American Studies. Her interests are Latin America and Latinx history. Reina Escobar King, welcome back to the Metro.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on again. It was super fun the first time. So.
Awesome. I love your energy this morning. So the history of Latinos in Detroit, Metro Detroit, it is a very long one. It is old as well, but not many of us know it and understand it. So when do we see Detroit begin to become home to folks from Central and South America?
Okay, well, Mexican immigration in Detroit actually began to accelerate in the 1910s and 1920s. And I'll tell you a little bit of background about that is the Mexican Revolution takes place from about 1910 to around 1917, but there's a lot of turmoil, right? It uproots everybody from, people in the kitchen all the way to government employees. Everyone's affected by this. Jobs are taken away. They're fighting. It's violent. And we have almost everyone participating in some way. So we see a lot of people leave Mexico, to leave the war behind. So that's why we start to see a lot more push in the 1910s and 1920s. And an interesting note is there was only just about 56 Mexicans in Michigan in 1900, but by 1920 there's 4,000 in Detroit alone.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just a huge influx of Mexican immigrants to escape, the violence and political unrest that's going on.
So
mm-hmm.
yeah, no, I was going to say, Dr. King. So I'm thinking about just the mass influx that was happening. Of course, you're running away from a war that's happening in your home country, and you're coming up and a lot of the times I think about the great migrations of African Americans coming up for $5, also fleeing persecution in the South, but they're also coming for better opportunities. So did we see that happening as well when we saw a great migration coming in?
Yes, because one was the beet industry and the sugar beet industry in Michigan.
Yeah.
They really wanted to bring in Mexicans for that type of work. And one of the reasons is because of the Bracero program, which was in place from 1942 to 1946, that actually was an agreement between the U.S. and Mexico that allowed Mexican citizens to work in the U.S. on short-term contracts. Although, I'll be honest, there was a lot of exploitation done to those people. They worked in very harsh conditions, but that's part of why we see such a huge movement then later with the farm workers. But one of the destinations for the Bracero program was cities like Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, these booming industry cities, right? Automobile industries that have just taken off in Detroit. So that brings a lot of Mexican workers there to Detroit, as well as railroads and just other factories that have been, started to be building up after the Great Depression. And so it was seen as offering better job opportunities in Detroit, and even a little less discrimination than what they saw, let's say, in the border states like Texas, California. We have a lot of racism, a lot of laws that people think of Jim Crow just in the South, but it also extended to Mexican and Hispanic, Latinos in the Southwest. We're running up against those very similar problems of discrimination.
Dr. King,
So
Sam here. I just want to jump in. I'm curious why you said there was more discrimination in California and Texas, say in border towns, than there was up here for Mexican immigrants. I'm wondering why that was the case.
Because the border is such a contentious place, and because the revolution had only happened about 20 years earlier. And so a lot of people have a fear of the border, a fear of Mexicans not really understanding what the fight was about. They kind of just saw it as this barbaric, uncivilized fight, when really it was a fight for social justice and equality. But that took into the mindset of these negative images that they're barbaric, that they aren't going to be good workers. And since it was so much present in the Southwest, like right there, as opposed to Michigan, where it's farther away from the border, you're probably not seeing the everyday effects of the political turmoil in Mexico. And that's why I feel that, and they also had very firm laws in place, too, that were discriminatory against Mexicans, that you didn't quite see it to quite the same extent, although we do definitely have racism in Detroit against the Hispanics as well.
Yeah, and that Mexican Revolution that you're referring to is from 1910 to 1917. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And after that, they really, unfortunately, Mexico has had such a very hard development throughout the modern period, and especially if you get into newer migrations like 1994 with NAFTA, which brings in a different complex structure of labor where the jobs are more going to Mexico. But yeah, so that's where we've seen it coming up into the 1950s and 1960s and into Detroit. But it's such an interesting period going into the 70s, though, because actually the Wayne State Center for Latino and Latin American Studies was born out of this Chicano movement that comes out of the 70s, and that's how we built our center, was really from the ground up with community workers pushing for more Latinx representation in Detroit.
Perfect segue. That's one of my big questions to you, is about the political movements that were born here in Detroit out of Latino struggles. you talked a little bit about how they manifested, but go ahead and give us more of a detail there about how the center was created and how we started to see more inclusive rhetoric in a society surrounding Latinos in Detroit.
Yeah, so I actually am friends with some of the former members that had brought together the center. They are alumni. They are very much pillars of strength in our community here. We have some that still teach courses. So it's very connected organically to the source of what brought us to be. And it did come out of the larger national arguments for including minorities, right? And so the Chicano movement is kind of born out of this. And so they were very militant in organizing, going to the provost office, sending letters that we actually have in our archive that line out exactly why there needs to be representation. And of course, it's because Detroit has a booming population, and it's called Mexican Town. Yeah. So it's like Bagley right there, and Clark Street is the heart of Mexican Town. So it was like, how can we have this population here but not have any courses in our university to talk about this population so they can learn where they come from, as well as teaching other people this population is important to Detroit. Mm-hmm. And in learning to understand it better and understand their culture can help us understand their contributions to Detroit.
Dr. Reyna, one more time. No, go right ahead and finish your statement, please.
Oh, no, I was just going to say we do have several prominent political and business organizations around Detroit, one of them being LACED, the Latin Americans for Social and Economic Development. They do nonprofit work and social services to provide for youth, senior citizens, immigrants, and just basic human needs. So, we have programs here that are very great in helping acclimate newcomers to Detroit as well.
I love that. We will definitely reach out to them and have them on the show. Dr. Reyna Escoval King is a Wayne State University professor for the History Department and Center for Latino and Latin American Studies. We will definitely have you back. Thank you so much for joining us on the show again.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Coming up, we'll discuss what's happening at a local women-led artist collective in Detroit as they welcome in a new cohort of artists. Stay with us.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET-FM. I am Tia Graham here with Sam Corey on the mic.
What's up, Tia?
It's up. It's up.
And things are up.
I know. And speaking of that, community building is a recurring theme here on the Metro. We do a lot to explore the creation of spaces that foster interpersonal relationships and safe environments. Womxnhouse Detroit is a collection of women creatives who aim to spread their knowledge and crafts while also bringing in new lovers of art. The home acts as a rotating exhibit with 10 women each cohort. This season at Womxnhouse Detroit, it brings a new set of local artists, workshop, and events. Joining us live in studio to discuss all of this is Asia Hamilton. Hamilton is the founder of Norwest Gallery of Art in Detroit and the co-founder of Womxnhouse Detroit. We also have two artists from Womxnhouse Detroit here representing. Michaela Ayers is a ceramics artist and host of the Black Her Stories podcast. And Kat Washington is a fiber artist with a specialty in tapestry crochet. She uses her work to practice and demonstrate meditation, peace, self-love, among other things. Asia, Kat, Michaela, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. Hey.
Hello. Welcome back for you, Asia. And welcome to the studio. But Asia, jumping in, the location of Womxnhouse Detroit, it's a former childhood home of yours. It means something to you. What does this mean to you to have this cohort of women here living in this or working in this space?
So this year, actually, we are at a new location.
Oh.
The first two iterations of Womxnhouse was at my childhood home. So we are still in the neighborhood that I grew up in. We're in Grandmont, right off Grand River. And the neighborhood has really received us so well. I mean, two people came down to the house last week, and they were like, "We'll be right back." And then they came with 8 people to come and see the space. So it's just been an honor to be in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And it's just an opportunity to provide art and culture in a space where, art can be desolate in the neighborhood. So I'm excited about this work.
Very, very true. I know that area very, very well. Grew up on the west side myself. Hey. So Asia, Womxnhouse Detroit, it did begin in 2020. You said you decided to build it up after COVID-19. Of course, you had a passing in your family that was close to you, your mom, and you decided to start the home and to start the collective. So if you can, just give us a little background about starting that collective and how it helped you through your healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. After my mom passed, she passed in 2020 from COVID, which was just a very scary time. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with the house at that time. I wanted to provide a space for women because my house had always been like a woman house. I mean, I have 4 sisters. It's always women in the house. It's always, ladies chatting and chatting it up and kikiing and having a good old time. So I wanted to provide a space for women artists because myself as a woman artist, just coming into, my career, I was going through a lot of pushback or not, the opportunities weren't quite there or just not sure, or even in some of the work that I wanted to display, it just was kind of taboo. I shot a lot of nude photography, different things like that. So I just wanted to create a space that was safe for women. I felt like I needed a space that was safe as well. A lot of times being myself can, I'm really like flamboyant and what up though, and just laughing a lot and having a good time.
We have a lot of that here.
Yeah. And that can be shunned. They want you to kind of quiet down and be meek. So I wanted to create a space in that house, in the house I grew up in, and also have that art in the neighborhood as well. But my friend Laura is who actually convinced me to make it into an actual exhibition space. She was like, people living here is cool, but what if we made this the art space? And she really opened my eyes up to Womxnhouse being a space where each room can actually represent the artist and their experience as a woman in America today.
And thinking of each room and thinking of the artists, we have 2 of the artists that are going to be represented throughout this particular cohort. And we just want to jump right in. I'm asking both of you, Michaela and Kat, talking about being cohorts in Womxnhouse Detroit. How did you 2 get involved? So we're going to start with Michaela. How did you get involved? Did you hear about it and say, I want to be involved in this, I want to be a part of this? Or what was your initial first step?
Yeah, so I had the chance to participate in Womxnhouse as a community member a couple years ago. I guess that was the first cohort, and was just really moved by the experience, just like being able to be in a home and to see how the artist transformed the space. And so I was an admirer for several years, I suppose, before the second cohort opened, and I was like, I have to apply and just see how I can participate directly.
And same thing with you, Kat. You work with fiberwork, needlework.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with Womxnhouse Detroit?
Yeah, I feel like I was stalking you all on Instagram for
So everyone was fans and admirers.
Yes. And I was in a show at the Scarab Club, and that's where I met Simone, who works with Norwest Gallery, and she encouraged me to apply for this year's cohort, and so I did, and the rest is history. We're really excited about it all.
Because we're so short on time, I want to make sure that we fit everything in. There are workshops, so I want to get into both of your workshops and artist talks really quickly. Kat, your workshop as well. So you're a crochet, you're needleworking. So you're going to be showing people how to do a little needlework.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to be sitting within my installation. I'm going to teach people how to crochet, specifically to make roses. A big part of my installation is processing grief and how fiber work, crocheting can be an essential instrument in processing that. And so the roses that we make will be sitting on an altar that I've made to honor Sonia Massey and Breonna Taylor, who are victims of police violence within their homes. And so it's the marrying of those 2, the fiber work with also processing grief in a home space.
Kat, we got about 30 seconds or so. Same thing with you, workshops or any artist talks that you're really excited about doing this time around.
Yeah, so Kat and I did our artist talks last weekend.
Okay.
And so I was really excited to be in the community with people talking about erotic power, which is what my exhibit explores through ceramics.
Whoa.
We're going to get more
There's
into
lots
that
of
for
that.
sure. We're going
Yeah,
to bring
there's a
more
lot
of
to
that
that,
to the
Michaela.
show. I
Thank
promise
you.
you we are. Want to say thank you to Asia Hamilton, founder of Norwest Gallery of Art in Detroit and co-founder of Womxnhouse Detroit. Michaela Ayers is a ceramics artist and host of Black Her Stories, and Kat Washington is a fiber artist. Thank you all so much for joining us on The Metro.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Sam and I will return tomorrow.